I'm just going to make a general announcement here. Again, we're great for sticking around here. I'm hoping that Kastner doesn't kick me out here because it went past 8. But we want to stick around and talk to you. My CMAC things are done, so everything that's said past here is not going to be recorded. Just want to let everybody know.
When's the next meeting to say what the next step
30
is?
30 days.
Here.
Yeah, so.
Can you find a solution pretty fast, because I'll be 89 next month and I won't see you.
Do you want more houses to be tested?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So.
I'd like to ask a going forward question, maybe a couple of them, just to kind of clarify a little bit so I can do what I can do. I heard you say something about the reverse osmosis at the point of service was a good thing, but you had some concerns about if it were to the whole house. That's one. I'm going to get them all out so I don't forget. Another one is you mentioned whole house flushing. What comes to my mind is that, well, how long is that good for? Doesn't it come back? And the other thing is, it sounds like if I can identify where I might have the mixed metals, like the phosphorus and stuff, and if I have a galvanized pipe anywhere, to get rid of that. And then to take it all the way to where the city water meets my personal pipe, that's what I have to do.
Correct. So on RO device at the point of use, that's pretty good because it's just that limited amount of metal that it's interacting with. RO on full home, probably not advisable. But you have galvanized or metal in it because water, by its nature, wants to get into an equilibrium. You took all those minerals out, the water's going to say, I need all those minerals back, and it's going to try and find someone who's going to go out to the pipe to get it. So if you just do it at that limited space, at that one, you're good. I would be hesitant to put it on a full system. And then the dissimilar metal question, yes, you don't, so the way you separate them is, there's this thing called the dielectric union, which is electrically isolates the copper and brass from the galvanized. So go ahead and, again, a plumber can work with you, see where those locations are, and it can help you electrically isolate those. That was the second one. The third one was flushing. Yes, the whole house flushing. So, great question, which is why we want to go back to this lady's house and test her, and then test her, and then test her to see how long the clear water persists at her home after she did the whole house flush. So that's some of the data we'll generate. We'll get that back. Similar to the data we're going to do on the stagnation. We're trying, how many days.
PVC pipe, because I'm slab under the house, and there's been some issues I'm in a condominium complex, a number of times the pipes are breaking, and what we're having to do is replace, and people are going up and over, they say, with PVC pipe. Would that be then safe for reverse osmosis through the whole house?
The plastic would, yeah, the plastic would be more forgiving for the PVC, but yeah.
I'd like more information on the recommendation to flush until the water is clear, because I know my home has also tested for lead when the water is still clear, and there was another person who verified that same thing. So how can we really trust that clear water is an indication of no lead when we have test results that verify that lead is still present with clear water?
Right, so what we want to do in those instances is come back to the home, and there's a smaller test we can do just for the faucet, because that would suggest that it's not the whole pipe that's contributing, it's just that fixture. And so what we want to do is, there's a small sample we can take just to grab the water out of the faucet. We'll see if the lead is actually in the faucet fixture.
And then, I mean, how many tests does it take for the city to do something? Is it that the city's just not going to do anything at all, and it's up to each individual person to replace their pipes and hope that the city, what the city is supplying, will work?
That's up to this point. That is the strategy that's been implemented by several homeowners.
We have several people who have multiple tests of lead in every different scenario that you've described, and it seems like there's no recourse.
Yeah, the one test we haven't done yet, and I don't believe we've done it yet, Bob, is just a small sample at the fixture, so that we can isolate is the contribution of lead coming from the whole pipe servicing that, fixture, or is it just as a fixture? So that's the one more additional test we're going to do. Because what we would want to do is tell you it's the galvanized pipe, but it's actually just replacing the fixture to make the lead go away.
Tommy, this is really from Mr. Bradley. Okay. Yeah, this is Bradley. I'm curious. On March the 31st, ABC ran a news article in regards to the bottled water issue. Okay, and I realized that at that time you weren't aware that the city was paying for bottled water. The question I have is, under your city budget, what line item, how is this justified, and what is the revenue source to pay for this? Does it come from our water bills? And also, I presume that a little while ago you stated that you didn't know anything about this. But there's a perception that there's written agreements between the city and these individuals. And if not, do we have a case of get the public funds?
I found out about the bottled water at the same time this news story came.
Right.
My assistant Ginger dug through her records to find out that they were, in fact, I was totally stunned that people were getting bottled water. That most likely, I'm presuming, city manager, probably came from the Water Enterprise Fund?
Still does.
Okay, the Water Enterprise Fund, yeah. So the Water Department, I'm assuming, pays for the bottled water.
And the justification?
Yes, so that's what we're.
So in other words, can the rest of us apply for that? Right now, because I'm not trusting the water issue. You know, I'm coffee, I put bottled water in there, I brush my teeth, bottled water. You know, I'm not looking for, reimbursement. What I'm looking for is, how can you justify this for a few compared to the rest of the area? Another thing, this area, is it only this area that's having this issue? I mean, I look at the area you're talking about. From an economic point of view, I'm sorry, with all due respect, it's a much higher economic basis. You know, I'm fortunate. I've worked for other cities and a number of cities. I've never come across this situation.
So where we are right now, and again, I credit the city manager for this, was the reports are coming from Northeast Fresno. That's where the calls are coming in. That's where the next door neighbor communications were occurring. So I've been focused like a laser on that. And the city manager said, like you just asked, it might not be the only place. We need to start looking at other places that those builders built in the same time frame. You wouldn't put the slab on grade, so we've got another exercise separate from this where we're starting to look at Northwest Fresno, where these builders were, where that kind of construction was done, to see if we've got maybe another issue up. It just hasn't presented itself yet, but it's close.
Okay. Another thing is that I would really be concerned in regards to when I hear people talking about class action suits. That's not a live issue, and I'm sure it hopefully won't get to that. I'm sure the city's going to address
That's
it.
why we're here tonight, too.
But please, you say there's another meeting in 30 days. Please have answers.
And solutions.
We're going to vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, so when I was 23 years old, I bought a Brentwood home over by Liberty. And it's 24 years later, I'm in the same home, so I'm pretty much one of the original owners on the street. And over the years, we have noticed as you're driving along, you'll start to get a buckle in the road and a pool of water. And then a couple days later, somebody's out digging up the road and replacing the pipes in the street. It's virtually happened to like every other neighbor in our neighborhood. So obviously the pipes, so one question is, what kind of water is coming into our home through those pipes that are being replaced by the city? It's obvious that the entire neighborhood is everywhere, the pipes are bad under the road. So how does that affect the water that goes into our home? Because even if we were to replace all the pipes in our home, that water is still coming from the street. And then the second question that I wasn't happy with is the first place you should test would be the schools. Where kids are going. They have no choice but to drink. I'm a school teacher, so I watch them drinking out of all the time. Liberty Elementary School, where I have my kids go, should be tested. Valley Oak, why don't you test those places first?
So our program for sampling is very prescribed. Unfortunately, schools are not part of that prescription.
But it's just so easy, just make it a part of your program.
Right, so working with the state on revisiting our sampling program, because we are treading new ground here on our sampling program. There will be some modifications to it on where we sample. Because again, we don't have homes with lead plumbing, we don't have homes with lead service lines. None of that applies to us on our LCR or lead and copper rule sampling. So we've got to come up with something else because we've got this condition occurring. So we'll work with the state to identify a more predictive type of sampling program where we can see this. On the pipe that's in your neighborhood, that's that plastic pipe? Polyethylene tubing. So there was a period of time when one of the code allowed this tubing to come from the main to the house, plastic. Still allowed. And it does not wear very well. It fails pretty rapidly, and so these guys are you're replacing with copper, and you're replacing with. So when they fail, it does what you just said. Presents itself as a leak. These guys go out and dig it up, and they replace it with copper. It was plastic, and now it's replaced with copper.
So how does that affect the water that comes into our home?
So it's plastic pipe in the system, so we're not getting any reaction with the plastic and piping. And the copper is proven to be a very robust and rugged material, so we're not having any reaction with the copper.
Is it galvanized pipes?
No. We don't have any galvanized pipes in the city system. All galvanized pipes are on private property.
I'm just wondering, do you have a law that we can, like, this is the first I really knew about it, I knew it was just coming up, and so is there a law where we can say, hey, we have rusty water, so we have a better representation of all the homes that are impacted by this?
If you'll sign up in the back, let us know.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, is there a log of when we first made complaints?
So my friend at the state, Cassie, asked me the same question, and it was pretty thin. On her files and on our files, we're not, there's not a file in the back you open up and say, oh, here are all the calls that we got on this could have, we're not finding them.
They gave me a plastic thing to fill up with my water. I turned it in for them to test. There's no record of that?
What's your address?
2404 East
That would be
Van
Walmart stuff? That would have been right during then?
5 years ago.
Yeah.
This was within a year after the water treatment plant was
So
turned
5,
on.
6. Yeah. So we are actively, because again, the Connors had pipe pulled from their house, sent to a lab and tested. I can't find that report. We're looking for that report. We're looking for all the previous testing data report. We're looking for a lot of things that might have occurred. After we met with you, it's like, hey, we've been talking about this for a long time. And I'm like, really? Well, let me go back to the office, find out what do we got around, and we're still looking for the files on this condition.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, as the regulatory agency, we have a responsibility for protecting public health. That's what our mission is, to ensure that the water you're consuming is not making you sick. And Tommy's right, I went back through all of our records, back to when the plant was put online. Carl and I were both involved when the plant was first put online. Carl was around in 1988 when the corrosion control study was done. We've been heavily involved in that process of getting the plant online and permitting the plant and all of the changes that have occurred at the plant since that time. What we don't have is documented records of customers calling and complaining about discolored water issues. So my message to you is, if you're calling the city and you're not getting a response, contact the State Water Board, contact the Division of Drinking Water. I can give you my information. The city knows how to get a hold of me. Some of your neighbors know how to get a hold of me. I live in the neighborhood. I would not want to drink that water. The mystery is that it's not at every single home. That's the mystery. And so if you are not getting satisfaction from the city, and we work very closely with the city, as Tommy's pointed out, but we as a regulatory agency need to know that so that we can follow up. And if we would have gotten a bunch of complaints dating back to 2004, 2005, we would have been having this investigation. We wouldn't have allowed the allegations of you reporting and nothing being done about it to happen. That we do not allow that to happen.
We have copies of our emails and everything
I saw, and that's why I mentioned that, because I heard you mentioning names that I've worked with over the years. Those complaints, if you do not get a satisfaction from your city officials, you contact the state and we will get involved. You can have my personal assurance on that. The other thing is, just real quick before you comment, the other thing is, in terms of our records, we have an isolated couple of emails from like 2005. Some changes were made, and that's the end of it. We haven't really heard anything again until January when we got involved again. And like Mark pointed out, there was a bunch of information on social media, and that triggered a response by a different administration. But please contact the Division of Drinking Water. We have an obligation to you to ensure that your water doesn't look like that.
Are you able to still contact like Robert Orhead?
He no longer works for the city.
I realize that, but he's still probably living among us, correct?
I would guess it.
Seriously, because I had a lot of conversations with that man, and I know he tried to help, but if he didn't even document or contact you in 2005, now I just think, oh, that just doesn't sound very good right now. That makes me even more upset.
And that's why I'm saying.
Didn't say it to you.
There's also one other thing I want to add from a communication standpoint. One of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we communicate more efficiently between departments? And one of the issues that we have is when we get complaints, sometimes they would go to the water department. And within the water department, it could go to the front desk. Somebody could call billing and collections. Somebody else called water conservation. Somebody could call a one call center. Somebody else could call either the mayor's department or the city council, and nobody's communicating with each other saying, hey, there's a connection between all of these. That's why the Nextdoor app is so, such a relevation to me and Tommy. But one of the other things that we do have now that I think it helps us to communicate between departments is a mobile app that's called Fresgo. Okay, so if you have Android or iPhone, you can download that mobile app, and one of the things we have on there for a service request is water. And there's water conservation, there are other water issues. And if you're having water issues, you personally can start that service request without having to go through, who do I call? And that's one of the things that we hope we're going to make our government, more efficient. Because you, as a citizen, can actually make the service request without having to go to a department person. It's automatically loaded in. And one of the great things, too, and we see this in water conservation, because we get a lot of folks that call and say, hey, somebody's watering down the street when they shouldn't be. Okay? We'll get somebody out there within usually a day just to check to see, hey, what's the issue? Is the sprinkler system you forgot to change over? Did you have a power outage? Is there a leak? What have you? But we can actually respond much more quickly and much more efficiently. So I'm going to recommend Fresgo mobile app, and just look for Fresgo on there, and that helps us to communicate within departments.
I would like to have heard a solution like you were going to go to every single house that is in the general area, and you're going to test every house.
And inspect.
We're in a concentrated area. I've heard 1,500 houses. Why
It's
are we not
15,000.
15,000, yeah. Why are we not going to each house and testing for lead? And it really does burn me about the schools. Our children on 100, 105-degree days drinking water that's criminal.
I'd like to comment about the schools. I've been with the Drinking Water program since a long time, since 1980. And in the mid-90s, there was a legislative bill. There was concern with the coolers that the kids drink out of, the cool water, and there was issues with lead and brass in them. There was a bill that was passed. This is a long time ago, and all those coolers were replaced. So to get rid of, so they're non-lead. I didn't grow up, but I live in this area. My daughter I live very close to Liberty. My daughter went to Liberty. She went to Kasner here, and she went to Clovis West. And so they're very interesting. I'm from the area here. I still live in the area. It's interesting. I live off St. James Circle, and none of my neighbors have complained. Believe me, I brought this up. You have dirty water. It really is hit and miss where it is occurring. But as far as the schools, Cassie nailed it. There's probably going to be some, even though right now there's no requirement to sample schools, except I'd like to point out that there are a number of schools that are their own public water system. So in other words, They don't get water from the city of Clovis. They have their own sources, their own wells, and so they're regulated as a public water system. They have to do lead and copper sampling. And so those are being sampled, and fortunately, in the state of California, we just went through, after Flint, we looked at Flint, we went through all the records, and there's about 4,000 to 4,500 water systems in the state that are required to sample for the lead and copper rule, because it's community water systems and non-community water systems like a school. Fortunately, there's only 18 of the 4,000 plus that have an lead action level violation. And all of them have a project to get in compliance. But we're fortunate here in that we don't have lead lines. Flint, Michigan, you know, some of these places back east, they have lead service lines, and it's really a big problem.
We just have it going into our homes.
Well, it's probably from, as you said, it's a lot of it's from the fixtures, and that's why the lead and copper rule requires first draw sampling, where the water's been sitting 6 to 12 hours, and you take that first sample. It's really a worst case scenario, but we're fortunate in the state overall that there's a really low percentage of lead violations.
Right, back there.
I did make a call many years ago, and I was told that it was a chemical in the water treatment plant. But is it my understanding that the surface water is soft and the groundwater is harder?
That is correct. The surface water is soft, groundwater is hard.
But then they are trying to kind of associate, maybe it's not proven yet, that water softeners are part of the problem.
Correct. I'm not at the point where I'm going to make that claim to you today that water softeners are not good, because I don't have the data to suggest it. So we're looking for some more water softeners that we can operate with them on, operate with them off, and then just see what kind of reaction we're having, what kind of reaction the pipe's having.
We switched over to surface water?
So in this area, the surface water plant came on June 2014.
2004.
Oh, that's
2004.
I missed the zero.
Originally.
I think it was June of 2004. June 2004.
Sir, back there.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for addressing this. I work for the federal government, and I know the shoes you're in right now, so there's a couple of issues. I've got several things. One is, you say you've been doing this testing. Is there any scientific methodology to how you're going about, you know, I mean, if you talk to anybody in academia, it's automatically there's a scientific method, there's, you know, different things they look at. The second is, and we kind of addressed it before, we're looking, we're not ready to make decisions, but at some point, we have to be able to be ready to make a decision. And I realize we don't want to pull the trigger too soon for lack of just throwing in there and not getting some good results out of it. I understand that, but I happen to have owned one house and moved to the very next house. The first house didn't have a water softener. The second house did. Now, that was in '99 when I was in the first house, and I moved over in 2001 too in the second house. And I've had those rust issues in my house. My next door neighbor, the other side of the house, the two houses that I own, he had a softener, he's had rust issues. And this is, again, right in that neighborhood of Liberty. My issue is it comes out of my hot water sometimes. If I want clean water, I go to my hot water side. If I'm going to get water to cook with or anything, you don't go for the cold side, you go for the hot side, because the cold side always comes out rusty.
So that's an anomaly that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of it on the hot water side. We do have a few that are reporting both, but that is an anomaly. We're seeing most of it on the hot water side. The softeners, again, the data is not there for me to say that it's ready to go, but we want to continue to test some additional sites. Was there another question?
Is there been a tide from some years of the softener being in play and now we're crossing over to the surface water and we're still flushing that out?
So what we as part of talking to our corrosion experts, the science is that whatever's causing the corrosion event, if you eliminate that, the corrosion event will abate. That's why it's the groundwater.
Fairly quickly, too.
Yeah, fairly quickly. And so that's why groundwater is generating color in some homes, surface water in some homes. We're trying to, what is it that is causing event.
Tommy and Councilmember Grant. I went and spoke to several of my neighbors, and we were all original owners of our homes. And the reason you don't have that many people here tonight is because they are afraid of once they have their water officially tested and it is documented, we're not going to be able to sell our homes. And, you know, it's just a matter of public education. I think it should have come from our council district. I appreciate that Public Utilities is doing it, but when you have people in fear of losing the investment that they've built over a lifetime, I have a 91-year-old mother and a 29-year-old daughter. We all have homes here. We're all affected. That's just in one family. It's pretty it can be pretty devastating. But I wanted to know what was wrong with my water. And I think we need to do a better outreach to this council district. And I like the idea of you going into northwest and southwest Fresno and looking for those same developers and finding homes that may have the same problem. Maybe they don't, maybe it is the soil, who knows? But I think that's something, and we have 3 different builders for the 3 homes in our family.
So that'd be one of those examples where we'd love to say it's that guy, but it might be different builders built the home. Right down here.
I think that there's 2 different issues here. The colored water does not necessarily mean there's lead in it, because lead is,
correct.
There's no smell, there's no color. It can hurt you drinking it, but you don't absorb it in your skin. So, it's 2 issues. And if people want to know whether there is lead in their water, they should, even if you have clear water, they should have it tested. And I'm sure Twining Lab can do it at BSK. I am a realtor, and if you're going to sell your house, I think you would be better to be forewarned and put on an osmosis or a whole house system of some kind, kind of in the process of trying to find out what we can tell our clients. And I've heard that there's a system you can put on at the house, that if the city's saying it's not them and it's the house, that you can then, if there's lead coming in, you can get it. But you're probably better off putting it at a sink where it's a direct line for drinking.
Point of use, correct.
And I think you should have it tested so you know, because you can't smell it, you can't see it.
So just on that point, and we should do this for Ms. Michelle and a few other folks, the full suite of analysis, and I tell people it's the A through Z of metals. It takes a while for the lab to get through that and do that data. But we are also offering a lead-only test for those people who call us and I got to know the lead. Yeah, I got color, but I need to know that. So we are offering a lead-only test. So people can call up and say, I'd like to do a lead-only test. We drop the bottles off, they fill them up, we pick them up, we take them to the lab, and we get the data back.
Clear. I had a house, I still live in the area, but I had a house, pipes disintegrated. They weren't wrapped. I had 2 floods. The second one totally destroyed my whole house. And I did have to repipe. I couldn't get insurance on the house. And I ended up spending $30,000 to replumb the whole house. It solved the problem, but I was told at that time that in the 80s and 90s, there were pipes that were purchased from China, your Asian suppliers you were talking about, that did not provide good quality, and that supposedly they weren't doing it anymore. I think that would go along with the fact that you're finding in this area where the houses were mainly built in the 80s and the 90s, because that's when this area developed, that this is a spasmodic thing from where people might have been buying from a supplier that was providing bad pipes.
Yeah, one of the pipe samples that was provided, that one of the ones in the back there, didn't meet the spec.
I would like to know, have you tested the water at our houses to see that it has an anti-corrosive in the water that's flowing through our pipes? Because what I read about Flint, Michigan, everything was fine when the Detroit water, which was having anti-corrosive, was going through, even over lead pipes, everything was fine. And then they switched to water with no corrosives. And in 18 months, their pipes had lost about 10 years worth of wear. And so, say at our houses, if we'd been getting water from from the wells that weren't having anti-corrosives, and I think we probably get the majority of our water from the wells, if we were getting that water with no anti-corrosives, have we lost 10 years off our pipes? And if that lining was thinner, maybe if we'd have had anti-corrosives going through there, it'd still be okay, even if it was thinner.
So what we're testing for now on that point is the phosphate residual. So we're using a polyorthophosphate. So we test the phosphate in the system in the distribution to see where it's at, and then one of the data points we're starting to reflect now at the home where we're sampling is the phosphate residual. So we'll present as in the report as phosphate. So we are testing for phosphate residual at the
That's not in
home.
our reports now, Tommy.
I don't believe we've got, I believe we've got phosphorus in there, but we really wanted to go out. So you got total phosphorus, which would be a part of the phosphate, but we don't have phosphate actually, we have phosphorus.
One other thing I wanted to ask, in the flood situation, they seem to be telling people that now we're adding the anti-corrosives and over a period of time, it's going to fix your pipes. Is that, can that happen?
Yeah, I really can't comment a lot about what they're saying in Flint, but our expectation is that it's not going to repair the pipe. There's not a thing we're going to do that's going to repair the pipe. But we can hopefully stabilize. You know, the goal, if the water is creating a condition that's destabilizing that iron, zinc, metal, what we're trying to do is see if we can create a condition where we can stabilize that. So that's like you talked about the calcium. We like the calcium because that calcium carbonate mixes with the phosphates and it creates that, I'll call it a candy coating shell on the inside. So that's our goal, is to stabilize it. It won't repair or restore the pipe.
The other issue is about the plumbing repairs that they say might cause problems. Well, I don't hear about that over in older areas of town, and they probably have a lot more plumbing repairs than we have. So that seemed like a little bit of a stretch to use that as a reason that our pipes are corroding.
Right. Well, I can tell you that, you know, we have seen the evidence of these dissimilar metals coming together, and then you pull the fittings off, and there is the goo from the copper and the galvanized just creating a condition that's generating red water on that faucet, and it's more pronounced on the hot water side. So I'm not saying it's a universal condition, but it's definitely a condition that we're seeing create color.
Why in our area? Why not other areas?
Well, again, I think the manager kind of identified. We're now, based on his comments, and I'm now of this opinion, we're not saying it's not happening everywhere, it's just not reporting anywhere. Kind of like here, I have only 15,000 homes, only 200 are reporting. There's more, and then, you know, the indication is, got to be more than that. Why are they not reporting? So we're only based on reports we're getting right now.
One reason they're not reported is people talk to each other, and even in our neighborhood, one person said, "Do you have rusty water?" And I said, "Yeah, I called the city about it, and they said it's our pipes." And so we don't report it because this is what we've been told through word of mouth, and then we find out, like, our whole neighborhood has it, but, you know, maybe the first person called and reported it and was told that, and, you know, it was like we trusted the city, and so we thought, well, I guess they know what they're talking about. So we've all started thinking about repiping before we even knew anyone else had the issue. But that's one reason you haven't heard more complaints, I think.
Which I guess also goes to why we think we need to start checking other places. People aren't reporting for whatever reasons they're not reporting, which is why we're going to start looking at other places where these builders have been before, this type of construction has been implemented. We got to start checking there just to see if we can, like comment earlier, because we get ahead of the curve. Folks,
I want to get some people. Who haven't asked any questions at all. Like way in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Can I hold it? I won't seal it. Okay. I'm Deborah Saxton. I'm a professor of anthropology at Fresno State, and I study medical and environmental anthropology. And I'm, as someone who does community-based research, I've heard a lot. I've been letting my wheels churn here and hearing a lot about homeowners' concerns, but as someone that works with low-income community members of color, I'm really concerned about renters and people that don't own their homes, and providing some insights as to why certain communities and other parts of Fresno don't report. It's not because they're afraid of their houses losing value. It's because they don't know how to navigate the system. It's because they're afraid of being evicted. It's because they don't speak the languages that we all speak here. And so I hope that when you do, and we're watching you as researchers and students, that when you do go to these other communities, that you take those things into consideration and ask us for help in navigating that if you need it, so that it doesn't become another disaster on top of the disaster.
That's a great point. We have people who have means, who are hesitant. We have to be recognized as people without means that we need to put a little bit more effort into communicating. I appreciate that. Thank you.
At some point, you will reach a point when you don't do any more testing. You'll have tested substantial to come to a hypothesis. Will that become a benchmark? So in the future, 10, 20, 30 years?
Yes, it will.
Will these homes be retested to see that there isn't a spike or a change?
Recurrence. So I think, again, lead and copper rules getting revisited probably the next 6 to 12 months. In our discussions with the state, we just need to revisit our whole sampling program so we can keep a better handle on this. Yeah, especially when we're mixing the two waters together, we need to know where the footprint of the groundwater is, we need to know where the footprint of the surface water is on a daily basis and how those things are tracking, correlate that with the calls we're getting, and start to know earlier that we've got some early warning signs like, hey, something's occurring, let's start working on the adjustments we need to make or do some more testing. But you're correct, there will be a more robust and rigorous testing program so that we can stay ahead of this in the future.
In addition to your analysis of the data that you're receiving from all of the testing and the information you gathered from speaking with residents, are you asking any specialists besides, you have people offering like the anthropology department at Fresno State, but any specialists to help you analyze the data, to help explain things or?
Correct. So we have 3 corrosion experts that we've retained to help us with this. Again, one of them is a specialist in galvanized pipe corrosion. He worked on the Washington, D.C., which is one of the most well-known lead outbreaks from galvanized pipe corrosion in the country. That person who worked on that project is working on this project with us. We have a lady who's working with us on the soil corrosion issue because that's happening. It's out there. We're seeing it. So she's helping us with the galvanized pipe corrosion in soil. So she's working us with on that, things to test, things to look for. We have another gentleman that's working for us. He's just been appointed by the governor of Missouri. He is on their lead and copper task force statewide to help this issue. He's working with us on the treatment plant elements of it to help us look at the chemistry, look at the 1998 report, what it recommended in 98, what are the conditions now, what adjustments might we want to consider taking. And all those folks have been actively engaged and they'll continue to be engaged. And we keep throwing data at them, they keep throwing additional tests for us to
So once you gather all of your data from those specialists, do you have someone helping you analyze and come to reach conclusions regarding what could be the cause or causes of
Right. So right now it's really a collaborative effort amongst our staff and those corrosion consultants, and then the state has a corrosion consultant as well that we'll be working with as part and put a final report together on our findings and recommendations for advancing this. So there'll be a summary group of us to get around the table and say, all right, let's look what the data says. Here's the path forward.
But all in-house, no one else to help with analysis besides your departments?
Right, and then these 3 other outside consultants that we've got working for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right behind you.
One more question. So we keep talking about galvanized pipe and how it may be inferior, defective, all these other kind of things. Why hasn't the city maybe gone out to some of the worst homes and taken samples of the pipe? I know that you guys did some potholing in our front yard. They didn't want to hit on the pipe too much to see what was going on because they were afraid of putting pinholes in it.
Yep.
Yes, but the only way we're going to know is to dig the pipe up. And that's the only way you're gonna know in a lot of these homes, is to dig the pipe up.
Right, so to this point, collecting pipe samples has been a very high priority, and we've been fortunate enough that people have been showing up with all these pipe samples. This graffiti is one of them.
Well, but a point on that one though is, those are people that never had their water tested before the problem. So you don't know what their water sample test would show because you've gotten their pipes after the fact, after they've replumbed. So we have no idea. Did they have lead in the water? I'm assuming maybe they had discolored water, but you don't know if they had lead in their water. You've got a whole lot of houses that have action levels above 15 parts per billion of lead. Maybe now's the time to start taking some of those pipes out.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so I thought, I misinterpreted your question. I got your question. So now that I have all the data, let me pick the worst house and invite and see if they'd be willing to let me pull the samples.
I gave
that
a
makes
pipe
sense.
sample of my current.
Right now, we've been very fortunate that enough citizens and plumbers have said, hey, I got a sample, hey, I got a sample, hey, I got a sample. So we've been grabbing all these samples from homes in Northeast Fresno that have had discolored water and replumbed.
Tommy, there's a difference between the line that's in the ground, between the meter and the house, that wasn't wrapped, because that was per code.
That's code. Still allowed.
So it's just old.
Just old and crumbling.
Versus one that is in a slab, which there's a code issue.
Correct. Right. So several of those pipes in the back there are what we would characterize tonight as a code violation. Not buried in the slab, didn't get wrapped. The other ones are pipe that was from the meter to the house, buried, not wrapped. Code allows that to be not wrapped.
How do you check those? Ones in slab?
So what these people did was jackhammered out the saw cut back the floor. That's why it's been hard for us to. So some of these homes, I'm not quite ready to just, okay, you mind if I come in and saw cut your floor and grab a piece of pipe. So we've been waiting for the plumbers and the homeowners to say, hey, I just did mine. Here's a sample. That's kind of what we've been relying on to this point.
Well, you might start talking to some of the insurance claim adjusters, because we're finding in our neighborhood, we've been seeing lately several claim adjusters, and they've been with the plumber in tow, and it's because they've had a break in the foundation.
Yep.
Yeah, which is why we're going to go, and Tommy mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. There is a phenomenon that we're seeing in which overnight, when there's no water flowing, we all of a sudden see this 10-gallon spike because of the way the meters are calibrated. And so we can identify our homes, it might be just a leaky faucet, but if we believe there's somewhere in the house or between the meter and the house, something's occurring, which is we're going to use that data or that algorithm, whatever you want to call it, to go now and look at Northwest. Because there are a lot of homes that got built about the same time by the same builders using the same practices. And so in order to get a real handle on how big a problem this may be, I'm not absolutely convinced that this is limited to Northwest Fresno. I have heard anecdotal stories similar to the lady who had a home. They lived in Northwest. They couldn't keep the tile floor up. They were having problems. They had wet carpet. They finally put in something and just sold the house and passed that on to the next property owner. And they were in Northwest Fresno. So we're not saying this is exclusive. What we're saying is we need to do some more analysis to determine how big of an issue we have.
What do you expect to have in 30 days? What do you think's going to happen?
I think we'll have a better handle on the surface water groundwater, because we'll have more data on, is it the surface water or is it the groundwater? The other thing we'll have is about 30 more days of operating the plant with these different conditions and seeing if, and again, hopefully people say, hey, I don't know what you did, keep doing it, or other people are saying, I don't know what you did, but stop doing it. So we'll have more data on, does this methodology we're working on in the state, I'm going to say yes, who does the meetings? Okay, let's say yes, we'll do it here. And if not, we'll get an announcement out to everybody.
Just one last thing. When I got the flyer in the mail about the water meeting today, I fixed it. So anyway, I asked my neighbors, are you going to the water meeting? They didn't know about it. So I copied off about 100 of these and I went knocking on doors. And the first question I asked them, I apologize for interrupting their evening. I said, do you have brown water? Yeah. I thought that was only me. Yeah, I thought it was the water heater. So are we asking people directly, do you have bad water? Do you have brown water? Because, of 100 people, only 6 people knew of this meeting, first of all. And I'm just a homeowner. I'm not with the city or anything. So, and a lot of people don't read the Fresno Bee. I didn't even know about that neighborhood thing. So how many people are falling through the cracks because we're not asking them the direct question? Is somebody going to go knocking on doors in these targeted areas that we know there's problems and ask them directly?
So better outreach. We need to get better outreach, better communication. Maybe we'll need a bigger room. Is this room going to fall down? Yes, I understand. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming out. Appreciate it.
Oh, go ahead.